Welcome to the Know Your Rights Camp podcast. I'm your co-host, Amir.
And I'm Dee.
And today we're switching it up a bit. We're going to be talking about the marijuana industry. And we have two amazing, talented, and accomplished entrepreneurs and activists who are here based in California who have been doing amazing work.
First, we have Whitney Beatty. Whitney Beatty is a dynamic former reality television development executive turned cannabis entrepreneur. Her cannabis storage company, Apothecary Brands, Inc., was selected for the first cohort of Canopy San Diego Cannabis Business Accelerator and won the ArcView Group's 2017 Los Angeles Pitch Prize. Whitney's newest endeavor is as a founder and CEO of Josephine Billies, the first dispensary catered to the recreational and medicinal needs of women of color. Its name pays homage to Josephine Baker and Billie Holiday, two Black women who were demonized for cannabis use. She also serves as VP for Supernova Women and the Cannabis Equity Retailers Association, and as an executive board member for the Black Los Angeles Cannabis Council.
Nice. That sounds like a cool council. I want to be a Where's my invite to that party? All right. We're also joined by Keka Keith, who's the co-producer of the documentary we're going to be talking about today, Kiss My Grass. And Keka is a nationally recognized entrepreneur and activist whose early work began in her inner city youth orchestra, Sweet Strings, that spanned over 20 years of hard work and innovation, to her most recent success, founding Guerrilla Wellness, becoming Los Angeles' first Black-owned women's dispensary. If you want to ask her why she continues to work tirelessly in her pursuits for equity, she say that she carries the profound love for her people and a heart that channels her intention for her profits endeavors and independently fund her nonprofit organizations to do, in part, what she continually uplifts and expands the community. First Crenshaw, and then the world. Thank you for joining us, sisters.
Thank you for having us.
So both of you are really 10 toes down into this marijuana industry, this cannabis industry sector that's, I mean, here in California, which was one of the first states to legalize marijuana in the United States, it's also heavy with regulations and taxes and other things. So it's not an easy sector to survive in. So just share a little more about yourselves and what brought you into the industry and some of the things that you've seen.
Let's see. I came into the industry in a completely different way. I actually grew up in Detroit in the 80s in the middle of the war on drugs. Nancy Reagan told me to say no to drugs, and I believed her. So I didn't think that woman was going to lie to me like that. So I did not consume cannabis in high school. I didn't do so really in college. I got out here, and I started working in the entertainment industry. And I was putting in these long 16-hour days. It was, insane. I was living off Red Bull and everything else. And I had an incident where I started feeling heart palpitations and pains down my arm, and I thought I was having a heart attack. And even still, being the only Black woman in the office, I didn't want them to see me as someone who's weak. So I was like, I'm just gonna go. I'll be back in a little bit, and drove myself to the ER and was like, I'm having a heart attack. I'm dying.
Wow.
Scared the crap out of me, and they rushed me in the back, and they were like, lady, you're not having a heart attack. You're having an anxiety attack. And I was like, that's not even possible because I'm a type A person and we don't have anxiety. And they were like, yeah, you do. And then I had to figure out how to deal with that. And the doctors prescribed me all sorts of drugs. And finally, after not liking any of them, the doctor was like, well, have you thought about cannabis? And I was like, oh, she's trying to put me on drugs. She's trying to turn me into an addict. But what it did is made me do my homework. And I did my research and I learned about the plant and the ways that it could help me. And I was able to find a regimen that allowed me to come off of those prescription meds. But I think maybe most important, I had to do some deep digging on why I felt that way. Why do I have a negative connotation on a plant that's been used for 4,000 years, that was more widely used than Tylenol up to 1920? And so that led me down the path of understanding, the story and the history of the plant. And once I did that, I was like, I can't keep this to myself. I know that I'm a woman of color. We're one of the most stressed cohorts out there. And yet we have the least access to healthcare. And when we do, doctors aren't listening to us. And when they do listen to us, a lot of people can't afford the medications that that they're being prescribed. So being able to have safe access to cannabis within communities of color, I think, is a public health issue.
Right.
And it really, encouraged me to step out and see what I could get done.
Yeah, that's powerful. And it sounds like both of you are part of like a decolonized healthcare system that allows for healing for something that's been traditionally criminalized and caused a lot of pain and trauma the way it's been responded to.
Absolutely.
Yeah, how about you, Keka?
Well, I was raised by parents that had a divine respect for the plant.
Okay.
And so we were anti-Reagan and everybody else growing up. And in my bio, when you said about my profound love for Black people was instilled in me from my parents that were community activists, that fought for the rights of our people, oftentimes to the detriment of our own household. And so forever I was looking to be in a position where I could help my community as well as make sure I sustain myself, as I'm a single mother of 3 daughters. And so when this opportunity came up to be in the cannabis industry, and that there were actually regulations that were in place to benefit people who were formerly incarcerated, people who were affected by the war on drugs. I grew up in South Central Los Angeles. And so I saw the ground zero for the war on drugs. And so this was an interesting opportunity, right? To be engaged in the economic development and policies that were in our failure. And I took that onus, left the food and beverage industry that I was in. So I had I had knowledge of working in a compliant industry. And I also knew how challenging it was. I knew I was taken off the shelf of Whole Foods because I didn't have my state permit, didn't know I needed a state permit. And so it was quite interesting that they were creating this program for people in our community. They had to be low income for social equity. You know, you had to be have a conviction, have an arrest coming from these communities. So then how do we make sure that we were prepared for that? And so that became my vow to get into this industry. It was more than me just opening up a business. It was also to make sure that people in our community were aware and had the opportunity to participate in this industry. I remember the Black politicians coming in the early days and saying, Black people, this will be your last time to be a part of a brand new industry. And that was profound, right? We couldn't be a part of the tobacco industry, the cotton industry, you name it, tech industry.
We were just a labor picking that cotton, picking that tobacco.
We were a labor. And so there were laws for ownership, priority ownership, supposedly access to capital, access to the technical assistance to be able to succeed. They had mandates for social equity hiring, so you could hire people from your community. And so there was an interest about justice, about my brothers and sisters that were still locked up, the ones that I knew got killed on the streets because of this. There was a reparative side that began to be a lot deeper than just me opening up a store.
Shay, that's beautiful. And now both of you are on Crenshaw too, right? And we talked about...
I'm on MLK, she's on Crenshaw.
Down the street from Crenshaw, yeah. We talked about South Central being ground zero for the war on drugs. And I remember when Michelle Alexander published her book, The New Jim Crow, she mentioned that in Los Angeles, even while weed was legal, Black people were still 4 times as likely to be arrested for it because some people were still being arrested.
To this day.
Right.
People are still being arrested. Don't get it twisted. We are the ones who are paying the ultimate price in legalization or in prohibition. It's always communities of color who are extended and feel the brunt of that. Yeah.
And you mentioned the reparative nature of some of these programs that are trying to do social equity and different things. But my understanding, it's still really difficult to survive as entrepreneurs in this industry. And that's one of the things the documentary Kiss My Grass talks about. So talk about some of those issues and some of the barriers that makes it hard to not just break into the industry, but also sustain yourself.
Well, you know, I said what the hopeful side was, but what we quickly realized that all these programs, and we're watching it happen nationally, were designed to fail.
Really?
My dad calls it the Trojan horse. That the big companies, as you'll see them start coming around, right? The Anheuser-Busch, the tobacco companies, they're coming in and locking down, and they'll take over this industry, right? The same way it happened with Prohibition. These cycles continue to happen. And so in order to get voters to vote for it, they had to have it be, we're righting the wrong. All these white governors will be up there talking about, we're going to right the wrong of the war on drugs, right? We're going to make sure that there's priority for those who suffered from the criminalization of this to get the voters to vote. In Los Angeles, it had, I believe, close to 87% of the voters voted for it on this premise. But what happened very quickly, as soon as it was legalized, the lobbyists of these big companies come in. They're behind the scenes with the council members, with the mayors, with the governors, with the senators. And what we began to see from the beginning, and let me tell you, in LA, you had to have a property to apply.
Oh, yeah.
Right? And so LA, you can imagine, you know what the rents are like. So we're social equity. We're supposed to be low income. You have to have a property to apply. And then all of a sudden, they just start dismantling all of the intent as soon as it got legalized in January of 2018. We would go to these city hall meetings and watch the this and the thous and the shalls turn to may. What you must do is at your discretion. But we were invested. You know, most of us had to end up doing deals with predatory investors because there were no protections.
Oh, wow.
There were no pro bono legal services. So how are you in a multi-million-dollar industry about to have a multi-million-dollar business that only you have the right to, because in LA you had to be social equity in order to qualify, right? So we're now faced with all these predators and sharks. Most of us sign predatory agreements, and we're stuck just to make sure that we take advantage of the opportunity. And so what we saw happen and is happening has been a grave injustice. And Kiss My Grass, we've been blessed to be able to have an outlet to expose the injustice that's happening, to make sure that we actually, the intent of the social equity program and to right the wrongs are actually righting the wrongs.
Yeah, that's beautiful. Kiss My Grass does a phenomenal job of storytelling this really complicated issue, uplifting the voices of Black women all across the nation. Shout out to the directors, Mary Pryor and Mara Whitehead as well, and the producers, Juxtapose Studios and Object and Animal. And it was also executive produced by Rosario Dawson and Colin Kaepernick and Roy Wood Jr. You know, and some of those star power folks lended their voices as narrators to talk about this nationwide issue. I mean, it's really an international issue if you think about the war on drugs and different things like that. And I feel like this is the same with a lot of people in our generation, but nothing's impacted my life more than the war on drugs and the way that America has criminalized, demonized drug use and even pushed drugs in certain communities. So that's part of the reason why I was seeing my parents ripped away from me as early as 5 years old, and why I had to visit parents in high school, why my brother was stolen from me, just a lot of stuff. And we're still dealing with the consequences and the trauma and the pain from that. And there's an attempt to undo some of that in some states with the legalization of marijuana and these quote unquote social equity programs. But also, marijuana or cannabis is probably the most regulated crop in the universe if you think about everything that has to happen. And we want safe and healthy marijuana. You know, we want good cannabis. We don't want to just pick up anything off the ground and buy something from any spot.
Right.
So it should be regulated and anything. But that also makes it more difficult and hard to stay in the industry.
Absolutely. I mean, look, when I think about social equity, it feels to me like they were giving out these, golden ticket cards. Like if they gave you a golden ticket to open a nuclear power plant, it's nice to have the ticket, but if you don't have the skill set, if you don't have the knowledge base, and if you don't have the money to actualize that business, it's just a piece of paper. And that's kind of, how we're seeing the cannabis industry play out with social equity. I'm a huge fan of social equity. And I think it's important that we mention that in this arena, social equity is the idea that communities of color have paid the highest price and deserve prioritization in legalization. One of the organizations that I'm in, Supernova Woman, we did a equity impact report. We looked at every equity program in the country to see how effective they are. Because at the end of the day, we can't be at everybody's city hall, but if we can give you the tools to let you know that, hey, if you run a good social equity program and you put $1 in, I can guarantee that you're going to get at least $1.25 back. And if you put the right pieces in place, you'll get upwards of $4 back. And so everybody, Democrat or Republican, can understand a return on investment. But what we're seeing is that the vast majority of people who've put up these programs do not have the right pieces in place. You can't say, I'm going to give you the opportunity to open a dispensary, Keka, and you know that in the cannabis space, everything costs more. Rents cost more. Product costs more. The security costs more. But I'm not going to give you any ways to raise that capital outside of investors, because we're in cannabis. We're federally illegal still, which means I have to raise money either from angel investors or VCs. Angel investors tend to invest in people who remind them of themselves, and for some reason, they don't see themselves as a 40-something Black single mother. I don't know why, but they don't. And then I've got VCs who are giving less than 2% of their money to women-led businesses. And we're talking about brown women-led businesses. Now we're at like 0.3%. So we don't have the opportunities.
0.3%?
0.3% of VC dollars. So we're getting drowned out. We don't have, so yeah, we got these golden tickets, and then the investors are the ones with all the money, and they're like, yeah, we'll fund your dreams, but we don't want your dreams. We just want the opportunity to open this dispensary, and we'd appreciate it if you go sit over there and never speak to us again and cash these checks when they come in or not.
I mean, it just seems like what you're describing is capitalism, right? It's capitalism, and the problem is they think that there's a blanket fix, and that if we name equitable programs and we just have this baby step, that's enough. But the whole system is rigged against you, and so
it's sharecropping.
That's what I was going to say.
It's sharecropping at its finest.
Yeah, and there's a difference with capitalism when they put social equity in the rules and regulations.
That part.
When they acknowledge the Department of Justice that Black and brown people were disproportionately arrested, right? And convicted, right? And so that's the difference where we say to everyone, like, you can't just treat this as a business as usual, right? Because the law doesn't say that. And that becomes a battle. I never thought I would be going down to City Hall every other week.
Every other week.
Every other week?
We are regulars. We need to have seats with the names on them.
So this is really a political game and a real estate game, right? When we talk about capitalism, right? Or the cannabis industry. It is about politics and real estate. And so when we talk about the regulation, which we all want for the public health issues that are happening, right, with what is out just on the streets. But that doesn't mean overtax me and eat every single profit that I have in fees and expenses, right? And so,
and my understanding is the taxes are as high as 40% or over 40%.
More than
in Los Angeles.
40% in Los Angeles. We just had a fee bump on July 1st that the excise tax went from 15% to 19%. And that's outside of the city tax and also the sales tax. Los Angeles has a 10% city tax. We have a 9.75% sales tax, and those taxes are paid on top of the taxes. So you have to compile them in order. So the numbers, so you're paying
Compound
more
taxes.
than 40%.
And for context, most of the time, whenever there's a tax increase, it's never that much of a jump. It's incremental at best.
Not on gas, not on
no other industry.
No other
tobacco,
industry. No other
alcohol,
industry,
things that we know are more dangerous.
It's usually like a point something increase, one at the most. So to see a 4% increase on top of everything, just for context, for those who might not realize.
I had a customer come in with a $300 order, and their tax was $115, right? And so when we talk about the public health issue, and if this was actually about regulating to make sure that they were safe product, then you're not going to send these people back to the street, because who's going to keep paying 42% in taxes?
Exactly.
Right? And so then even the viability or the equity or the value of our businesses has been compromised, even if you make it past the first hurdle, right? To open your doors. And I opened my doors with $7,000 on working capital.
Wow.
Right? And so when we talk about the disadvantages from Black women, from Black men, to minorities that are in the space, small business owners that are in this space, the disadvantage that we have in the lack of working capital to sustain whatever political changes change the way that you need to operate your business. On top of all of these factors, again, this was designed to fail. It wasn't meant for us to even still be here today or have a documentary to be able to speak to these continued injustices, which is why I think we're even motivated even more to fight.
Yeah,
absolutely. I mean, they have set up a system where there is now all these distressed businesses. When we first got into this, when we were trying to keep our properties or what have you, it cost me $250,000 just to keep our property as we waded through the hurdles of this. So now, of course, we've got the least amount of money. So we start off with nothing in the bank account. We're going immediately into debt. Most businesses do not make money for the first 1, 2, 3 years. We did not have the capital to survive that, which is why all of a sudden you've got these licenses that when we got them, they were like golden tickets and they're worth millions and millions. And now you can buy them by the dozen for $50,000 because the amount of debt attached to each of these businesses. It is impossible for us to be able to meet our obligations, to be compliant to the regulations, and simultaneously make money. The people who have that ability are the people with deep pockets.
The mega corporations, the multi-state.
They've got $50 million. And they can wait me out.
Can wait,
absolutely. We're going to sell $2.50 joints, and we're just going to wait for Whitney to die, and we'll come and snatch up her license for pennies on the dollar.
Capitalism
And
is a
that's,
mother.
I was gonna say, and that's capitalism.
That is.
You know, they make you do the dirty work and then try to wait for the profit and then push you out, right? So.
And the unfortunate thing mentioned in the documentary was that out of the 17 businesses interviewed throughout the process of creating the documentary, 11 of them had to either sell all or part or shut down their business related to it. So it's a hard industry to even survive in because of all these taxes and regulation. And one sister said like she increased her sales by 300% and it's still not helping
That would be
them.
this sister.
That was you, right? Yeah. So 3 times as many sales, right? You seeing your bottom, you're seeing it, right? You're seeing the money come in, but just with the taxes, with them taking that much off.
We're still, we still can't meet the threshold of the rest of the things. Think about, in order to have a dispensary, you have to have some sort of security on site. So now I'm paying, upwards of $28, $30 an hour for a security guard that you should be having 24 hours a day. That by itself is $24,000. Most people in this space, doesn't matter if you're on MLK, Crenshaw, or 62nd Street, you're looking at upwards of $10,000 to $20,000 a month in rent. Now we're not even talking about my staffing, which I need to have staff that in order to operate this business safely and compliantly. Those base costs eat us alive.
Yeah.
They eat us alive. So even if, I'm bringing in 300% more, that still doesn't get me to cash flow positive. We need to have some sort of wiggle room. And then the inventory is expensive as all get out. So I don't think that the people who came up with these regulations, well, I also agree with Keka that this was designed to fail, but they did not have a working knowledge of the cannabis industry as a whole. So we have spent a lot of our time as advocates teaching people. I'm more than happy to pull out my P&Ls because I think that there's an idea that, we're in cannabis and the money is just raining from the sky and we're just being, evil people who don't want to pay our taxes or don't want to pay what, we've owed, and that's not it. If we had it, we would pay it. But my priority is always going to be to make sure I can pay my staff, that we can keep this business going, and that we're fighting.
Right.
But, there's a point in time where have we fought so long that the personal risk is too great? And that's the hard part.
And this is hard because y'all are doing it the right way, when there's so many people doing it the wrong way. Like Keka, the documentary showed your place actually being raided by law enforcement, by officials. Meanwhile, there's lots of other illegal or illegitimate, non-permitted, non-secure dispensaries down the street from you that aren't getting the same amount of smoke or different things. And it's almost easier to go in and do the under the radar dispensary, which I'm surprised myself too that how many dispensaries are actually illegal. Some of the spots that I would go to that are just so blatant in public, but they're not operating under the same rules that you all are operating under.
Yeah, it's absolutely easier. Prior to this knowledge, we were going in and talking to brothers and sisters who were on the street saying, listen, you need to come over to this side, helping them with their license applications, helping them get prepared for this. And I think, too, that's probably why I still fight now and I haven't closed my doors down because this just isn't a wise business decision. 42% in taxes, right? If you look at it out of 100% and then all of the expenses that Whitney mentioned, my property on Crenshaw, and as popular as Crenshaw is, this is a hood, right? Where on the block, folks are paying between $1.50 and $2 a square foot. I'm close to $10 a square foot, right? My rent is at $20,000 for a 2,000 square foot place, right? So the way that we're getting taxed in every single aspect because we're a part of this industry, it really puts us in a position that we gotta keep fighting.
Please.
At this point where you're just so far in that there's something like in my soul that like you just can't stop. You can't go out like this. I've spoke this opportunity up, and I bought my own hype. I bought the hype of the industry, and now obviously I've got clearer vision, but I still believe in the base issues. The base issues is that communities of color have been disproportionately disenfranchised. We do deserve prioritization. We deserve safe and healthy plant within our community, and we deserve to have spaces in our community where you can come in and see the community reflected back in the people who are working there.
Right.
And it's important. We need to buy back our blocks. And this is a way that can happen. It drives me crazy at the same time as I'm driving down and knowing how many black men got arrested on a corner and seeing a white multi-state operator operating on that corner instead of them.
It's ridiculous.
That's wild.
It's offensive. Like, I'm from Jersey originally, and when I was back home for Christmas in Jersey recently, legalized marijuana, cannabis. I had several friends that were still incarcerated related to, if not directly a cannabis charge, the police saying, oh, we smelt weed, they searched the house, and now my brother's doing 5 years for that and different things. And not only that, though, but while I was home for Christmas, I went to one of the first legalized dispensaries in my hometown, Plainfield, New Jersey, and it's owned by the mayor of the town. It's located in the former probation space of the town where I used to go and have to urinate and used to get yelled at by my probation officer. So it's housed in this like carceral thing. There's like a retired cop there at the front who I was talking to him, and I told him, I was like, yeah, I used to come here for probation and pee in a cup. You know, it's interesting to buy weed here now. And it's like, oh yeah, the mayor owns it, because the mayor's connection, like you mentioned, officials. But the cop told me, he was like, yeah, I locked a lot of people up, and you know, he's now retired. And the security, like you mentioned, the security there, but that's what's happening in communities. The people who are able to access it is the mayor of the city. He was the one able to get the land, the property to access the regulations, the permits.
The largest cannabis operator in the state, Glass House, is an ex-police officer.
You shit
The
me.
largest.
Just got raided.
Which
last
strands
week.
do they have? Which brands so I not buy them?
It's literally it's under the name of Glass.
Glass house,
Glass
that's
House.
it? Okay, no glass house.
You know, actually, there was a mom and pop shop in the neighborhood I live in now, Little Tokyo, that was actually going to be, they kicked out a mom and pop shop that were there for decades. They actually lost their shop and came back for it, like because it's a Japanese neighborhood, like during the internment. And it actually, after all these protests, it was a cop that bought the space and wanted to turn it into a dispensary. And so, well, he didn't last a week. So it never even opened. But I mean, that's not a crazy story.
Yeah.
But I just wanted to share a story with you, actually. I have family, and I grew up not too far from where your shop is.
Oh, really?
And I discovered your shop by complete accident. I happened to be in the area, and I was like, where is I mean, I don't live there anymore, so I don't know. And I'm like, where is the closest dispensary? And I didn't know, because if you just were to drive by, you wouldn't know.
Yeah.
You know, it's really discreet. And so I was like, oh, am I in the right place?
We're in the cut.
And yeah, you guys are in the cut. And not only that, like, you can miss the door.
Yeah, you can.
So I went in with a friend, and we were like, oh. And we ended up not just looking at the product, like we actually bypassed it, because whoever was there was like, can I show you the space? Like, let me tell you what it's about. So we got to see the back room. There's this beautiful back room in your shop for events. And, you know, it was really cool to see that, because I grew up in the area. My family lives there now. And so we've had these not so great experiences of like, what the hell are these cops doing, the mayor?
Right.
But I just wanted to share with you that I had a different experience. And it was cool to see that. And it meant a lot. It meant a lot. And like, I talked to my family about it. I was like, why didn't you tell me? And they're like, oh yeah, we knew. I'm like, thanks for telling me. But it was cool to have that experience. It's a different experience.
I love hearing that, number one. Thank you for stopping by. But I also think that that's, you know, for me, why I wanted to open a shop.
Yeah.
Because people are all the time saying, your shop would have done better if you were on Melrose, if you were on the West Side.
Sure.
But communities of color deserve these sort of spaces within our community. We shouldn't have to travel 10 miles to the West to get something nice. I believe that, and you know, and people are like, you just wasted your money. This community deserves things that are just as nice as everyone else. And for me, I wanted to have a dispensary that I felt safe, welcome, and happy to like touch things on the shelf. I was tired of going into dispensaries and it feels like the black hair care section in Walmart. Everything's behind glass.
Yeah.
I can't touch nothing. I'm like, you know, this plant is not going to jump out of the packaging and attack you. So I wanted to have something that someone felt comfortable bringing their mom, grandma, or whatever, and asking the questions necessary to get the experience that they want. Because at the end of the day, plant medicine is confusing. If this was alcohol, people understand there's a difference between champagne, beer, wine, tequila, all these things, and you've got the same sort of variety within the cannabis space. So I can give you things that might help you with your, stress, your anxiety, but you would never feel actual, euphoric high. We can do tons of different things. My mother used the creams all the time to heal pain. And so being able to have that connection with the community and be a safe resource, I think is powerful for both of our businesses.
Yeah, you're both medicine women in a sense, traditional. And Black people have had so much connection to land and planting and growing and farming. And I myself, that's part of why I took this cannabis course last year at Long Beach City College. It was like a certification course.
Oh, that's awesome.
I thought, I was just like, I want to be a farmer. Like literally every generation before my mom grew their own food. And my mom was the first one to break that cycle that goes back to Africa with us growing okra and different things. So I'm like, all right, let me roll my sleeves up and farm, but I'm going to farm some of that good, some of that sticky icky, right? So I take this 8-week course twice a week at Long Beach City College with their collective down there. And I was surprised at how complicated this course was. Like I've taken over 100 courses while doing 5 degrees at different colleges and universities. But this course was like science and biology, looking at the plant and how to tell when, there's rot or infection, to looking at the regulations, looking at the taxes, businesses, human resources, legal, and I'm a lawyer, so they had a whole week just on the legal regulations and stuff. And for me, that was the eye-opening spot to see, wow, I guess this industry isn't as easy to get into as you thought. And one question I asked the professor really showed that, where I was like, hey, they just open it up, any questions. And these are all growers and distributors and people at different sectors of the industry. And I said, yeah, well, I'm getting some property and I want to have 2 or 3 rooms to start my own operation. And she almost laughed at me saying no, you're going to need $1 million. You're going to need this and that. I'm just like, oh my gosh. I just wanted to grow a few plants. And
I would start with $4 million. Don't believe that one. Don't believe that $1 million. Don't believe that hype. You're going to need more money than
crazy.
that. Oh, absolutely. That's why you see, we have the ability to sit here as people with retail licenses, and then there ain't that many of us.
Right.
And there's even less that are on the cultivation side because of the startup cost of that, especially if you're growing stuff that's indoors. And I always find that it's interesting that indoor has become, this top of the line, and, rappers are talking about that indoor because you get to control all the things, therefore you can have a little bit more THC percentage. But no one goes to the farmer's market and says, hey, can I get them GMO tomatoes? I want that GMO. Nobody's doing that. They want sun-grown or what have you. And so in this industry, we've also started this thing where people don't feel as good about growing their own plant. They want that stuff that is coming from, and obviously I'm selling both sides. I'm selling sun-grown and indoor. But I think that it's very interesting that now it's an industry where people don't think of growing it themselves. They don't think of the same quality when it's outdoor and grown up in the Emerald Triangle, which is where the best weed across the country comes from.
There is a great opportunity, though, right? In our ability to control our supply chain. That if there are enough of us, you can't do it singularly.
Right. Yes.
Right? I think we learned this as we're co-founders of the Black Los Angeles Cannabis Council.
Nice.
And realizing that if we're just trying to do it ourselves, the story you said that there's only 11 left, next month there will be 9, right?
Yes.
And so it got to the point where we realized, wait a minute, if we link arms together, first on the retail side, right? But now if we connect them with the cultivators, with the distributors, if we build, and there's more of you, that let's collectively get together and do this, right? And to me, that's the opportunity with this film, with Kiss My Grass, to bring, not to just speak about the hardships, because this shit is hard.
Right.
But it also is to say, wait a minute, but we're still not going anywhere. And then how do we then create this as an opportunity? And so that is what exists. It also exists, and it just is divine that we're here with Know Your Rights, right? If we actually recognize the laws that are in place, and there is enough of us that are collectively saying, you must follow the letter of the law, there must be prioritization, there must be capital and access. If it's enough of us saying these things, there is a great opportunity, and we've seen it in every industry. There's thousands of craft breweries that exist no matter whether Anheuser-Busch or Corona, whoever is around.
Right.
There is another level of cottage industry that exists. And just think how many consumers there are. Right? Whether it's topical.
Is a $45 billion
Come on
industry
now.
a year. $45 billion
And
a year.
that's illegal.
And that's illegal. So let's think about everybody else, right?
Yeah.
Let the big guys take that group. But we have the opportunity to capture such a big market that still exists, that still is outside of this legal market. And so the opportunity does exist, and is to preserve us as the retailers, because no matter whatever license you have, if you can't get it on our shelves, which is also really crucial, we make sure to carry women-owned product, BIPOC product, Black-owned products on our shelves, that the big guys aren't trying to hear nothing about putting them on their shelves, right? So we are constructing an ecosystem that can thrive if we can control the supply chain, and that's where the opportunity lies.
I just want to comment really quick. Is that almost sounded like an allegory for when we talk about building collective power in communities, right? But now you're talking about doing that not just within the community, but creating this in the business space for the community. And I just wanted to point that out. Like, it was very much an allegory for building collective power, and that sort of, I was going to ask you what keeps you going, but I think you answered the question just by explaining that.
Yeah.
Yeah, and the film had a really powerful portrayal of that when there was like a bunch of Black women sitting around this table and they were talking about the collective here in California alone and the connections and, knowledge sharing and information sharing that's happening. And when I saw that, I just saw a bunch of like warrior healers there, because this is work from healing the war on drugs, healing that sort of stuff, but also the current issues. And it's really powerful to see that sort of village emerging.
Yeah.
It's a blessing that the community has come together like it has. We are very clear on the fact that there's enough business out there for us and everybody else who's a retailer. The opportunity is there, and unless we link up, and unless we do community buying, unless we all work together, none of us will survive. And that's just real. So I think that more than any other place that I've worked, any other industry that I've been in, cannabis, and especially people of color in cannabis, women of color in cannabis, have really done the work of breaking down barriers and trying to figure out where we can meet in the middle. How can I help your business and you help my business? Great example, we did like the Black Box, which was we at the store had thought, let's do a thing for Black History Month. We're going to put all Black brands in it, or what have you, and we're going to sell it as a group product. It's going to be $40, and people can try all these
That's amazing.
Black-owned brands or whatever. And we're like, well, yeah, we could do that at our store, but the smarter plan is to get all the Black dispensaries out here to sell that and let people drive traffic to all of these within their communities, and which is also getting the brands some fire. And we came together. We did a social push. Keka was a part of it. I think that there was like 7 or 8 of us, and it was amazing. We had a line outside of our door for people trying to get in, and that showed us, there's enough space, there's enough opportunity for all of us if we can think about this in the right way. And I think that the big guys would love for us to fight each other to the death, and because then they'll come and pick all of us up. But we decided that instead we're going to know our laws, know our rights, and go down to city council and everything else. And I think that the work that we've done there is some of the stuff that I'm most proud of. I mean, our store has been open, I guess we're going on our 4th anniversary, and I started 3 years, so 7 years of going down there and fighting for making sure that these laws came to the books, and then about how they were applied. We, the tax situation, we've talked, a number of times about how high that is, but we're constantly talking to the governor, to the mayor about how to bring those things down. Me and Keka have sat in, the mayor's office meeting, and we're just now, after years, hearing them say, we can see that this industry is going to collapse. Yes, it's going to collapse. It's going to collapse, and we're not going to be around. But unless you lower these taxes, and unless you do enforcement on the people who are not paying them at all, you can't raid Keka's store for missing a tax payment, but Bob's been down there selling weed for the last 10 years, and you never picked up a tax from him, but you're going to come after her? That's bold as hell. And so we had to find that middle ground and figure out ways to get loud as a community. And I think that's where you feel that from.
You know, this community part is important because we've talked about the business side of it, which is a special type of person that wants to go in the cannabis business or work in the cannabis industry.
Yeah.
It is a type of character. But there is a greater cause here when we talk about community, because all of these tax dollars that are coming in, again, the promises that were made. In the city of LA, there was supposed to be a community reinvestment act that just disappeared.
Right.
That tax dollars were to go to the communities to
I
program.
heard something about that. Yeah, but I ain't seen no
That
dollars.
was 8 years ago, disappeared. Never went
Wow.
past the conversation at the city council table.
What?
The same thing at the state level. Now you have some places like New York who have that as a priority and written into the legislation. You have corporate social responsibility, where all license holders are supposed to come in and do benefit to the community. Are they tapping in with the local youth programs or with the drug prevention programs? How are they tapping in, right? And to provide resources. There was to be a social equity workers mandate where they were mandated to hire folks that were formerly incarcerated or were on welfare assistance, right? All of those things have just disappeared. Those mandates have never been enacted.
I remember those conversations.
You better
And I
believe
thought
it.
there was follow-up. I assumed.
Absolutely
that
not.
money went right to the general fund.
Absolutely. So there's a bigger benefit, again, that's in the books and the regulation. And if it's not, and if it's a city or state that is talking about it, that is the community's obligation outside of the limited licenses that are available or the jobs that will be created. There are dollars that are to come to our community to right the wrongs of the war on drugs. Right. And so I also say that it is important for all of the listeners to get engaged in this, whether you are believe in cannabis or not, whether you use it or not. These dollars need to repair the damage that has been done, like you said. It is about the children and their children that were affected by this, not just the people who were incarcerated.
Right.
And so it is imperative, and that's why this film is important. That's why we take the time to come and speak about this, to understand the injustice that is happening, to keep us from being here to talk about it, but also, again, the opportunity outside of the economic development side is the community reinvestment and the community development side that does not have to come through welfare, that should be coming from these billions of dollars that they're taking out of that 42%. It should be coming back to our community, and we got to demand that.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, what the taxes are so high. What the hell are they doing with the money?
General
Enforcement
of the
and
city.
what is the largest budget of the
police.
general
The
fund?
police.
So that's like
Period.
the. Oh my
But
gosh,
what's
I'm so
wild is-
infuriated about that
yeah,
right now.
I know. I was like, I think we
having a
should,
much better day
just
before.
for but for context, that's always been a problem in LA. Is the rest like the distribution of wealth and the budget has always gone to the general fund, which is just code for police and law enforcement.
Billions
right?
in LA.
Billions, and so I think if for those who don't know that, for those who aren't from LA and hearing this, that's the context you're working in. There's this demand for a redistribution of wealth in quote unquote the right direction, the equitable direction. But what we saw is that, of course, that was the first thing to go.
And they're raising. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
And what's wild is that even though they're getting all these funds from us, they're not using it for enforcement against illegal dispensaries.
Right.
They're using it for other things. So literally, we are funding the police to go do everything else but respond.
That's what I was
to
just about
us.
to say.
Right.
Like the 10, 20 million that they spent on police, suppressing protests just this summer on ICE and stuff, and the raises that police are getting.
Yeah.
That's why they're raising taxes on you all to pay the police more. And the
Right.
irony of the fact that the police, especially LAPD,
LAPD
specifically
specifically,
LAPD,
and the sheriff's department
And the
too.
sheriffs,
They get
too.
it. They get a little bit too.
but they've criminalized so many people and harassed so many people and still arrest Black people specifically. That's what it is. That's what the data shows.
Yeah.
So that department is getting enriched by
Yet there are 4,000 smoke shops in the city of LA.
4,000.
4,000
There's not 4,000
that
schools.
sell
More than
weed
Starbucks.
Right.
in their stores and are not being enforced.
Wait,
Yeah.
that's the number of unenforced ones?
Because the smoke
Unenforced.
shop, for those who
yes.
don't know, the smoke
Yeah,
shop
oh,
is not
yeah,
the
that's the
weed
difference.
shop. It's
Right.
supposed to be the tobacco.
So I was thinking
But when they
that-
come out from behind the
yeah,
counter,
they come back from behind the counter, right? Yeah,
you can get whatever you like.
4,000.
yeah.
And the police are upfront with that. We've gone to meetings
Yes.
with them where they're like, since legalization, we have
We
not
have not enforced
prioritized any enforcement. So the people who are enforcing are actually CDTFA. That's the the tax people are coming to break down doors and rolling in with 15 armed people
To legal stores.
to a legal shop where you scare the heck out of the employees who are also people of color from this community.
Intimidation and just
All of that.
Yeah,
It's frustrating.
it is.
So the point isn't necessarily to end on a happy note, but okay, take everything we talked about, but you're still doing this. This documentary exists for a reason, right? It's not to say, oh my gosh, this is so hard, don't do it.
Yeah.
It's, oh my gosh, this is so hard, we do it anyway because. What's the because? You do this anyway because
Our community deserves it. Our community has paid the ultimate price. We have had so many resources, so many opportunities stolen from us because of this war on drugs. And we deserve that reinvestment. We deserve that opportunity. We deserve to have healthy plant medicine within our communities. We deserve to have those jobs and opportunities to sit at tables of power and to be able to affect change, not just, on our block, but on our community as a whole. So I think that it's incredibly important that we continue to take a place in this industry. At the end of the day, if this was the end of Prohibition and someone was like, hey, do you want to open Jack Daniels? Of course you want to open Jack Daniels. And this was our opportunity to start something. And it's not going to be easy, but we continue to climb up the hill because we know that it's worth it. And for me, my joy is to see the people who are coming behind me not have to face the same hurdles that I did. Can I do something to take these down? Can I do something to make it easier for you to come into this space too? Because there's enough work here for all of us if we work it together.
We do this because of legacy. It has been pretty cliche as we've heard the generational wealth term said quite often associated with this in social equity. But I wish I had my grandfather's alcohol license in his hotel that he had, right? The value of these licenses when this becomes federally legal, the value of being in a position in this industry 20 years from now with these licenses is why I do it to this day. I do it for my brothers and sisters who couldn't do it. And as Whitney said, to have the ability to then say, this is the key, we finally figured it out. But this plan is something special. This industry is based on a plant that brings life and it is healing. And so to protect that integrity, to not let the commercialization of that destroy what the gift is. And so I believe that we're a protector of that gift and that it is worth fighting for.
Amazing. Thank you. And, thanks for knocking down doors and pulling people through. Sometimes people forget the part about pulling people through. So commend both of you for that work.
So how can people see Kiss My Grass, the documentary?
Well, Kiss My Grass will be upcoming at the Dumbo Film Festival. Please go to our website, kissmygrass.com. And then later in the fall, it'll be open to the general public.
Beautiful.
Amazing. Thank you, and also our guests for joining us. You can get more information at knowyourrightscamp.org.